This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel, broadcasting remotely. Municipal and state governments have a lot of costs to consider, with or without the pandemic. Today we talk about the state's waste crisis. When you wheel your trash bin to the curb, you expect it to be emptied, but have you thought about where all that trash goes? For many years, more than 4 dozen towns have their waste processed at the Materials, Innovation, and Recycling Authority, or MIRA Trash to Energy plant in Hartford. But that plant is closing in 2022. That means tons of trash could be trucked out of state, and that will be costly. And not many other Connecticut facilities exist to recycle that waste, especially food waste. Today we'll talk about this and more with Katie Dykes, Connecticut's Commissioner of Energy and Environmental Protection, or it's also known as DEEP. Do you have a question for Connecticut's top environmental official? You can join us, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. You can share a comment on our Facebook page or find us on Twitter at Where We Live. Now, before we talk to Commissioner Dykes, I wanted to take a moment to reflect on this date. It's been 8 years since 20 children and 6 educators were killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown. And as a parent and a Connecticut resident, I know I will never forget that day. And I want to acknowledge the pain and the grief that persists today from that tragedy. So again, as I mentioned, we're welcoming the State Commissioner of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection on the show today, Katie Dykes. Commissioner Dykes joins us on Zoom. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Lucy. It's great to be with you.
So I mentioned the MIRA Trash to Energy plant at the top of the show, and this has taken the garbage from the greater Hartford region for many years. Our listeners may know that it's a plant that's been aging. There's been outages in the last few years, and I understand that under the Malloy administration, there was a bid to help to redevelop this plant, and to do that, the MIRA plant was asking for subsidies from the state. But earlier this year, you sent them a letter denying that request and writing in part, quote, "It represents a false choice and a bad deal for taxpayers across the state, Hartford residents, and the environment." So tell us more about your stance on this, and what does that mean now for all of the trash that was headed to the MIRA plant?
Well, thanks, Lucy. First off, I just want to say how important it is for us to be talking about the silent waste crisis that Connecticut is facing. You know, it's really important at this moment for everyone to know, not just in the Hartford area, but across the state, what's happening, the pressure that we're going to see on municipal budgets or local taxes or program cuts if we don't take action. And my favorite part, the sustainable solutions. Like collecting food scraps and increasing recycling and unit-based pricing that can help us to avoid this crisis and improve our quality of life and the quality of the environment if we act now to embrace them. And, so just to put the MIRA facility into context, Lucy, our state throws away about 2.4 million tons of municipal solid waste every year. So that's about 750 pounds per person. And about 88% of that material that we throw away is burned at 5 waste energy plants that are located across the state. These plants, incinerate the garbage and they produce steam that's used to generate electricity. And, a couple decades ago, this was a major solution for another environmental challenge that we had in our state, which was we have a lot of municipal landfills that were polluting our waterways and generating greenhouse gases. And so communities came together with the state to build these waste energy facilities to help enable us to move beyond and close local landfills that were burdening nearby communities. So these waste energy facilities have played a really critical role in enabling our state to, be self-sufficient in how we manage disposal of our waste. And they're really critical because they handle so much of this material, right? But we also know that they have impacts on local communities where they're located in terms of air pollution. And many of these waste energy facilities, like the MIRA facility in Hartford, they're aging and they've become more expensive to operate. And so that's really the challenging spot that we've come to, is that the MIRA facility, at present requires more than $300 million in investment support in order for that facility to be refurbished. And those are just dollars that we don't have. And I think that from the administration's perspective, if we're going to be making an investment of that magnitude, we really need to think hard about what we're investing in. Not necessarily the technology of a couple of decades ago, but new solutions and sustainable solutions that are available, that are proven to work in other jurisdictions, and that can have better outcomes for and the health of our communities and our environment, and long-term for the costs of managing our waste here in the state.
A listener tweeted that this person said, more than 30 years ago, I worked at the state authority that dealt with trash, which burned electricity, for electricity, and negotiated the establishment of Connecticut's first recycling facilities. Now, Connecticut's sending its trash back to landfills and has given up on recycling. Is that what's going to happen, Commissioner Dykes?
That's what will happen if we don't take action, talk about this crisis, and come together to, seize those opportunities for better solutions that can move our state forward. And that's what we're doing right now. So this summer, DEEP reached out to municipalities across the state, inviting them to work together with us to investigate those solutions and tee up the best options that can move the state forward. We call that the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management. Lucy, I told our team that we at DEEP that we'd be excited if we got, 12 or maybe 20 towns to sign on. We got more than 74 municipalities that signed up into the coalition, large cities, small rural towns, led by Republicans, led by Democrats. It speaks to how much our municipal leaders see this crisis coming, how it's impacting their budgets, and how, frankly, enthusiastic they are about coming together with solutions that will help prevent Connecticut from taking steps backward towards reliance on landfilling to manage our waste. It's concerning because we've had the amount of waste that's being exported to landfills has more than quadrupled since 2013. From about 63,000 tons per year to 300,000 tons per year in 2018, and that's increasing. Folks may, as waste energy becomes more costly to operate, it's more costly for towns to send their waste to waste energy facilities. And landfilling, which was previously, more expensive, and by the way, we're talking about landfills located outside the state of Connecticut, suddenly that's starting to look more affordable for some towns. But what we are seeing is that exporting to landfills out of state is not sustainable, either environmentally or financially. Between now and 2026, we expect about 40% of the landfill capacity in the Northeast is going to close. And so Connecticut's waste will have to be transported farther and farther away to reach disposal sites, which increases costs and greenhouse gas emissions.
You're hearing Katie Dykes. She's the state commissioner for the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, as we talk about, as she called it, the silent waste crisis, where all of the state's garbage will go. Again, the MIRA trash plant going offline in 2022, and the fact that municipalities are going to have to be paying to truck this trash outside of the state to other landfills. So what is the solution, Commissioner Dykes? Can you talk specifically about when we think about comprehensive waste management? One of the ideas out there is pay as you throw. What does that mean?
Well, Lucy, we've been looking at 4 different types of solutions to manage our waste more sustainably. First, you have to kind of take a peek into the garbage bin and figure out what actually is getting thrown away. And the surprising thing is, most of the material that we are sending for disposal is actually material that can be recycled or reused. And about 37% of the material that is going into trash bins around our state is organic material, like food scraps and yard waste and other materials, which can be composted at home, donated, processed into animal feed, or sent to anaerobic digesters and composting facilities to be repurposed into compost and to generate fuels like electricity or renewable natural gas. So just right there, we've seen tremendous enthusiasm from the municipalities we've been working with to look to implement innovative programs that can help pull that really valuable material out of the waste stream and get it to anaerobic digesters and other infrastructure that, where it can be reused in a positive way. So that's a huge opportunity. And again, if we can pull that percent of material right out of the waste stream, then it helps to reduce our reliance on landfilling on the remaining waste energy facilities in the state. And it's better, it's cheaper to send organic material to an anaerobic digester than it is to send it for disposal. So that's one example of the type of solution that we've been looking at. We've also been looking at solutions around increasing recycling. Another large percentage of the material that is, we find in the trash bins is material that could be recycled. We have a great track record in our state of high recycling rates. And there's more paper, plastic, metal, and glass that's being disposed of that could be diverted for recycling. So that's another really important place for us to continue to make progress. And then finally, go ahead.
I just wanted to break that down a little bit more. So you talked about food waste, and I understand that there's been a law in Connecticut for some time where there would be businesses that could recycle that food waste. But what has happened with that process? I think our colleague Patrick Scahill reported that law went into effect back in 2011, but I think there's just one producer that's doing that. Why haven't there been more incentives to get more businesses online to recycle this food waste, Commissioner?
Well, we're really excited about working in 2021 on a whole comprehensive approach to driving investment in anaerobic digesters and composting facilities. And, we have a lot of the pieces of the puzzle to get that infrastructure deployed, but we haven't really put those puzzle pieces together effectively in recent years. So here's how we're going to bring all those pieces together, Lucy. First, we want to strengthen the diversion requirement for large commercial generators who, like food manufacturers or large cafeterias or other types who generate a lot of food waste. We can help save them money by connecting them to places that they can send their organic waste instead of disposing of it. And then, by securing that valuable waste stream of organic material, that sends the signal to investors in anaerobic digesters and other facilities like that. That there's going to be waste for them to an organic material for them if they build these facilities in the state. We need to make sure the facilities are located strategically around the state so that folks who would be sending waste to them don't have to transport it a far distance. And DEEP has a really important and impactful role to play here too in streamlining the permitting for anaerobic digesters, both on farm and grid scale anaerobic digesters, as well as we have authority to run competitive procurements for power purchase agreements, or we're seeking authority for renewable natural gas purchase agreements for these anaerobic digesters, which helps provide them more certainty of revenue. So when you bring all of those pieces together, we know that we can improve on previous efforts to help scale up this really important infrastructure around the state to make organics diversion from the waste stream a reality in the state. So I'm really very excited about what this can mean for helping to transition our state, not taking steps backward towards landfilling, but steps forward towards more sustainable choices that will be better for our economy.
So that's food waste, but what about just recycling in general, Commissioner Dykes? I mean, we know that the market has collapsed. China hasn't been taking the U.S. recycling for some time. Single stream is what everyone thinks about, but the idea that it needs to be, going back to the individual and having to separate this, and where does it all end up? Can you talk about that?
You bet. So there's a lot of success in our recycling programs across the state that we can build on. Certainly there have been, some changes in the commodity cost for recycled materials that, have gotten a lot of attention over recent years. But this is, again, very valuable material. And we're seeing a lot of changes in the recycling markets, including companies that can repurpose this recycled material starting to locate here in our state. For example, we have a major manufacturer that's going to be recycling recycling glass material. They're just cutting a ribbon in Beacon Falls this week. It's really exciting to see them coming forward. Recycled content standards can help, again, drive those end markets for recycled material. There's a whole lot of work that we can do here, but some of it comes down to investing in our recycling programs, education and promotion and materials, staffing for recycling promotion at schools and in towns, investing in recycling coordinators to really help people learn how to recycle, not just the quantity, but we want quality as well. So that's a really important part of a successful recycling program in the state, is ensuring that we are investing in those programs. And so, one of the things that we've been talking about in this process is how to make sure that we have that kind of funding to invest in sustainable choices, just the same way that we invest in our disposal infrastructure in the state.
Again, my guest is Commissioner Katie Dykes. She is the Commissioner of the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. You can join our conversation, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. We need to head to a quick break, Commissioner, but I started the show talking about how this trash to energy plan is set to close in 2022. The clock is ticking. I mean, what needs to happen in the next several months to help municipalities and the state deal with these impending costs?
We have a host of recommendations that we're going to be releasing on Wednesday through the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management. Many of them are things that municipalities can do individually or working together as region. We have things that DEEP is committing to do, everything from streamlining our permitting processes to, again, helping to drive investment in anaerobic digestion. And there are a number of legislative options that are in this list. We're really looking forward to engaging with legislative leaders about the kinds of tools that we need to scale up sustainable alternatives and help to solve this waste crisis. So we're really looking forward to bringing those forward in the next couple of days and jumpstarting that conversation for the legislative session next year.
Again, that's Katie Dykes, the Commissioner of the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. You can join us 888-720-9677 or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. My guest today is Katie Dykes, Commissioner of the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Do you have a question for her? She's the state's top environmental official. The number to join us, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WMPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. We just talked about one of the challenges before Connecticut, and that's the waste crisis, but we also need to think, Commissioner Dykes, about our residents and their concerns about global warming on our state, pollutants, reducing transportation-related carbon emissions. And I wanted to talk with you about fossil fuels. Earlier this year, you were at a Trinity College Connecticut League of Conservation Voters Summit, where you told the audience that you believe the state should move away from natural gas, saying, quote, "Natural gas is not a bridge fuel, it's a fossil fuel." And that's a reference to under the Malloy administration seeing, natural gas expansion as a bridge fuel, so to speak. And so I wanted to talk more with you about, what your priorities are after saying that, and how the state can move forward with reducing our fossil fuel dependence.
Well, thanks, Lucy. I have never been more hopeful and positive about our opportunities to tackle the climate crisis, both here in Connecticut and at the national level, than I am today. And in part, that's reflecting the hard work and involvement that we've had from hundreds of stakeholders and experts in our Governor's Council on Climate Change process that's been underway during this pandemic. We're going to be delivering to Governor Lamont in January a very long list of near-term actions that the state can undertake to help reduce carbon emissions and also prepare and protect our communities from, especially vulnerable communities, from the impacts of climate change. This is really, really important work, and I'm excited about what this means. We have made a lot of progress in reducing carbon emissions from our electric grid through development of renewable resources, investment in energy efficiency, one of our most important resources. And we're very well on our way, actually, to meeting a goal that Governor Lamont called for, which is to achieve a 100% zero carbon electric grid by 2040. More than 50% of our electric supply is, reflected by investments, including investments in solar and other resources that have been made to date. So we're going to be releasing a draft integrated resource plan this week that maps out ways that the state can feasibly achieve a 100% zero carbon electric grid. But the transportation sector you mentioned is now about 40% nearly of our greenhouse gas emissions in the state. And we have really important opportunities ahead of us to help crank down the carbon emissions that are coming out of internal combustion engines, out of our transportation system by making investments in that area. So we're really excited about the opportunities to tackle that as well. And by the way, huge benefits that will have, not just for just slowing down climate change, but also for improving air quality and reducing asthma rates and helping support families across the state that are struggling with poor air quality.
Commissioner, you've also talked about how Connecticut should consider withdrawing from the regional power grid. That's ISO New England, saying that it lacks leadership to cut fossil fuel use. Again, their policies are driving larger investments in natural gas and pipelines and power plants instead of investing in renewable energy. Can you talk more what that would look like for Connecticut to withdraw from this power grid?
Of course. So Connecticut, we are about 25% share of a regional electric grid that we share with the rest of New England. And, as we look to how to reduce fossil fuel use, whether that's coal or oil or natural gas, that's emitting greenhouse gases, we have to tackle this at the regional level and by reforming the regional electricity market that we rely on for our energy supply. The ISO New England is the regional grid operator that operates this grid and designs this market. And it's very, very frustrating that the way that they have designed this market includes putting the finger on the scale for natural gas power plants, which end up disproportionately being built and located here in the state of Connecticut. We are now a net exporter of electricity generation here in Connecticut, hosting this generation for the benefit of the rest of the region. But there are a number of different things that the ISO New England has been doing in recent years that explicitly favor natural gas over other clean energy resources that the states prefer and have legislative mandates to implement. The ISO has also been building barriers, erecting barriers to their market to prevent clean energy resources that states are investing in from getting credited or counted in the ISO New England market. So, as we have highlighted these challenges, and Connecticut has been litigating and advocating at the ISO New England for years to address these things, it's been incredibly frustrating to see the lack of responsiveness in months past. But, Lucy, what we've discovered is that we're not alone. This October, Governor Lamont joined with 4 other New England governors in issuing a call for reforms to the ISO New England wholesale energy market, to the way they plan transmission, and frankly, to the way that they conduct their business to improve transparency and accountability to consumers. And we are now engaged in a 6-state effort to join together and map out a new course for how we can get these markets working for our consumers with more affordable and reliable power that is achieving our climate and clean energy goals. I'm really excited about what this means going forward.
Commissioner, I'm glad that you brought up what's happening in our region, because I understand that Connecticut's the only state in our region building a new natural gas facility. I'm talking about the Killingley natural gas fueled power plant. I believe that's still going forward. There are residents and environmental groups asking the governor to stop these plans. Does this contradict you and the governor's goals to cut carbon emissions? Why not halt this project?
Well, again, Lucy, what we've been saying is that we have to address this on a system-wide basis. That the plant is still going through permitting review and other milestones. So those are underway. But I will say that if we halted a brand new plant here in Connecticut, if we don't without reforming the ICE in New England market, we're just going to see older, dirtier fossil fuel power plants running more. We're going to see more fossil fuel power plants in other states increasing their generation. So I hear the calls and I understand the concerns that people have had about this particular power plant. I know that to respond to those concerns and actually reduce carbon emissions across the region in a real way, in an impactful way, we have to go to the source. We have to change the market rules and the preferences that are built into the ICE New England market, to turn off the tap and to essentially redirect the investment that's coming from that massive market to clean resources that are actually helping to achieve our clean energy goals. That's what we have to focus on. Otherwise, we may find ourselves enabling that market to have older, dirtier power plants, by the way, located in a lot of environmental justice communities, running more and polluting more. So we have to take a systemic approach. And one of the most important things that we can do, one of the most impactful things we can do, is drive investment in more zero carbon renewable resources. So for example, the investment that Governor Lamont has sponsored in offshore wind, signing contracts with offshore wind projects, the Park City wind project that Vineyard Wind is developing. That coupled with earlier offshore wind investments will mean that 20% of Connecticut's energy supply will be sourced from that clean renewable resource by the mid-2020s. And the more that we do that, the more that those offshore wind and other renewable resources are developed, the less those fossil fuel units, old and new, will be generating in our state. That's how we help to, again, address this systemically and see more fossil fuel units shutting down over time.
Again, you've been listening to Where We Live with the State Commissioner of the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, Katie Dykes. We'd love to have you back, Commissioner Dykes, to talk specifically about more solar and wind projects in our state as we talk more about the need for investing in renewable energy. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Lucy. Really appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
Again, this is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Coming up, we're going to hear from some environmental groups about the state's priorities. But first, this week is our end of the year fundraising campaign. We talk about a lot of topics on Where We Live. You hear from people like our state commissioners, our governor, and Connecticut residents all over our state. Please support Where We Live and Connecticut Public Radio with a pledge. Here are two of my colleagues to tell you more. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We just heard from Katie Dykes, Connecticut's Commissioner of the State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. We wanted to get response from environmental groups and activists in our state. Joining us now on the phone, Sharon Lewis, Executive Director of the Connecticut Coalition for Environmental Justice. Sharon, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Also with us, Adrienne Huck, co-founder of the New Haven Climate Movement's Youth Action Team. Hi, Adrienne.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to start with Sharon. We started the conversation talking about the MIRA plant. This is something your organization, the Connecticut Coalition for Environmental Justice, has been working on for years, especially when we think about pollution to nearby communities. What has been your reaction now that the MIRA plant is slated to close in 2022?
Can you imagine? Total elation, celebration, excitement, sort of bittersweet moments because we're looking forward to having folks eliminate a lot of the chronic illnesses that they have that came directly from being exposed to incinerator pollution. We're just elated.
When you talk about some of the health conditions, so asthma, high rates of asthma in the communities around that plant?
Oh, definitely high rates of asthma and many other respiratory diseases. We have lung cancer, which is also involved, COPD, respiratory issues like cardiovascular diseases, anything respiratory, some types of lung cancer. Just it's a terrible mix of respiratory illnesses which devastate one's health.
So when we think about this trash and energy plant closing, it leads to other concerns, including trash going to landfills, which we know landfills in communities just like the ones we're talking about. And so what is the solution from your group standpoint of what needs to happen now that this plant is closing?
Well, first of all, we don't espouse landfilling. In fact, we oppose landfilling and incineration. And for the state to have to send the state's trash to landfills anywhere else but Connecticut is another environmental injustice. We'd rather have Connecticut folks focus on reducing the amount of materials that they waste, reducing what they send to landfills, so that there would never be a community exposed to the adverse health effects that comes from either the leachate from the landfills or pollution from the stacks.
When we think about composting and recycling, it's not always easy in particular areas. When we're talking about urban areas, what are some of the challenges with getting people to recycle, or even depending on where they are living, mixing things up, ruining the recycling and the waste that you want to separate from to begin with?
Well, let me just first correct you. A lot of people assume that urban people do not recycle. Urban people and low-income people invented recycling. I do not know of a single person who hasn't had something they no longer use, who hasn't picked up a telephone and called someone to say, can you use this? What you do find on the streets in some areas is truly garbage, something that no one else can use. Conversely, you drive through the more affluent areas and all you see good things on the street. Stuff that people just don't like the color of anymore. People are renovating their homes and they'll put stuff on the streets. And if people don't pick it up, it comes straight to Hartford to be burned.
What about composting? I guess that's what I was mostly talking about, this idea of composting, which we heard from the commissioner.
Well, there are lots of people who do composting. And also another misconception is, especially folks who come from rural areas in the South who are used to farming, one of the misconceptions is a lot of people are introducing urban farming to urban folks. But a lot of urban folks have been farming their entire lives. And unbeknownst to a lot of folks, these people still have pieces of land in suburban areas where they continue to grow their own vegetables. Composting is another thing that I grew up with in Windsor, Connecticut. I mean, separating the organics and composting was just something that we did as a matter of course. So I know there are some challenges in urban areas because if you're living in a building with multi-units, there's no space on the grounds for you to have a composting area. If you're living in a 2-family or a 3-family house that doesn't belong to you, sometimes the landlords don't want that because it causes issues with cleanliness, with breeding of vectors and rodents. So, it is better to do the composting in suburban areas.
And so I guess the question being the people need to provide support to help people do it. If it's composting, it might be an issue in a particular area, or getting suppliers to come in and find ways to take these materials just to help residents?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
mean, I think the best way to do it when it comes to urban areas is to have people turn over their organics to other folks to do the composting, because it's never going to be consistent in urban areas. You're never going to have a massive buy-in from the landlords or property owners to say it's okay to do composting on my property. So unless you own your own piece of land, it's difficult to do this consistently. And as all of us know, composting pits don't really look that good. They don't smell that well. And most people, I would not want someone next door to me to have one if they weren't doing it properly.
You're hearing Sharon Lewis, Executive Director of the Connecticut Coalition for Environmental Justice, as we talk more about some environmental priorities that communities want to see in our neighborhoods. Also joining us, Adrienne Huck, as I mentioned, co-founder of the New Haven Climate Movement's Youth Action Team. Adrienne, as you hear the commissioner talking about priorities and from your group standpoint, what do you want to see the state pursue?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, my team at New Haven Climate Movement isn't directly involved in the battle with the MIRA facility, but I did want to bring up just my own views about that. Definitely agree with what has been brought up. Turning MIRA into a transfer facility and transferring our waste to other communities is not a solution. And really, we have to act very quickly to find a solution by the time that the facility is phased out by 2022. So I propose that Connecticut looks for methods to reduce our waste up front. I'm not sure if I support a pay-as-you-throw program just from an equity standpoint, but I do know that 32% of Connecticut's waste is food waste and other organics. And I think that Connecticut can ban this from the waste stream, as Vermont has done, and instead invest in large-scale composting and anaerobic digestion facilities. It's been actually successful in the New Haven and Hartford area. There are two programs which I know of that collect food waste curbside. And as we approach the end of the MIRA incinerator's lifetime, it makes sense to work towards developing these new and cleaner facilities to divert a major part of Connecticut's waste material. And I think other options outside of large-scale composting could be bold recycling reforms, incentivizing recycling, and better educating residents about it, and even passing an updated bottle bill. So there's so many ways that we can start, but the main thing is that we really just do need to start.
How has the pandemic really impacted these efforts? I was thinking to the plastic bag ban, but then during the pandemic, having grocery store workers and others dealing with reusable bags, the state had suspended that for a few months. And so I'm just curious, Adrienne, your thoughts on, moving forward as we have so many priorities in front of us.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. As a climate organizer, this has been a very big roadblock. And as you were saying, like even with plastic bags, something that we very just recently had enacted a ban on was rolled back for the pandemic. And we can see that even mirrored on a national scale, big polluter companies being allowed to emit more and taking those regulations off during the pandemic to make it easier for businesses. So there's definitely mirroring going on there. And with our efforts, we've definitely had to adapt to a virtual space for our organizing. We can't, really protest too much in person, so we do need to find ways to work around it. But definitely, for example, with New Haven, our team helped declare a climate emergency in the city in 2019, which would ask the city to get to zero emissions by 2030. And already a whole year has passed and the pandemic came up and there hasn't really been much action on even the first steps of meeting that goal. So definitely it feels like we've almost lost a whole year of climate action. But definitely there's so many ways that people and organizers are showing up and still pushing to get this work done.
Sharon Lewis, what about you? When we think about moving forward, and we're still in a pandemic, what should be some priorities moving forward? When we think about also the impact of climate change.
Well, there's a couple of things I'm thinking about. I'm very concerned about the fact that this administration has refused to tighten air pollution standards for particulate matter, which, as we all know, mainly affects respiratory system. And, there are numerous studies out right now that are revealing the degree to which particulate matter from pollution sources like incinerators influence disproportionate rates of COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths and environmental justice communities. So we're very concerned about that. In addition, we are very, very interested in, concerned about the fact that most of the frontline workers are people who are low income and communities of color who are exposed to coronavirus in everything they do. They are the Uber drivers, they're the Lyft drivers, they're the Instacart workers. They're being exposed and they're bringing that home to their sometimes multi-generational families. So, there's lots of economic issues involved here as well.
We just have a couple of minutes left. Bringing it back to Adrian as a young person, again, co-founder of the New Haven Climate Movement's Youth Action Team. Your final thoughts on, seeing if the state is pursuing the right priorities with the urgency that we know so many young people want to see happen.
Yeah, so I've been talking about environment mostly, but I do want to bring it back to climate. As a climate organizer, I have my main focus on the climate crisis, since climate change is truly the biggest threat we're facing as an environment and as people globally. And so what I think that Connecticut can be doing, first of all, no new fossil fuel infrastructure. We have to remember that natural gas is actually also a fossil fuel. It's not as clean as we're told it is, not as clean as it's marketed as. And also, Connecticut does have a plan of reaching 100% clean energy by 2040 and a plan for 45% greenhouse gas reduction by 2030. But something that we do push for at New Haven Climate Movement is a Connecticut Green New Deal, which essentially means bold climate action and equitable outcomes for marginalized communities. And so these goals are great, but the honest truth is that we are in a climate emergency and the time frame is very slim. And as a young person, it's very daunting. We only have really until 2030 to act before there's mainly irreversible damage on climate change. And so some things that we can do, my team at New Haven Climate Movement, like I had mentioned before, is having New Haven declare a climate emergency, and also New Britain has. But really, these cities both vowed to reach zero emissions by 2030, which is actually more of an aggressive goal than the state. So really, the bottom line is we do need the state to step up. There are good goals set already, but they have to be more aggressive, I think. And really, we also have...
Adrian, we want to thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but you're co-founder of the New Haven Climate Movement's Youth Action Team. A lot of great the points that you have raised. Also, Sharon Lewis, thank you, Executive Director of the Connecticut Coalition for Environmental Justice. We appreciate your time as well. Today's show produced by Carmen Baskoff. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. It's our end of the year fundraising campaign. Support Connecticut Public Radio. Here's the number to call.